In July 2021, travel vlogger Gabby Petito and her fiancé Brian Laundrie set out on a cross-country road trip heading westward. With every uploaded picture and video showing details of their adventure, the world saw it as a dream trip. Yet behind each carefully curated post of wild smiles and sweet moments, a very different story was unfolding, one that shocked the internet and captured worldwide attention. Born and raised in Blue Point, New York, 22-year-old Gabby Petito had always nurtured a passion for traveling and adventure. Her dream of visiting national parks, exploring city attractions, and documenting her experiences was something she spoke about often. And by the summer of 2021, she was ready to pursue it fully. With her white Ford Transit van, which she and her fiancé Brian had converted to a camper for the journey, Gabby envisioned documenting each step of her travels online and sharing important moments of their trip with her growing audience. Brian Laundrie, her fiancé, was known to be a calm, reserved, and artistic man. He spent most of his time sketching and exploring nature. These traits seemed to complement Gabby's more outgoing and social personality. The young couple had first met in high school, but their relationship only began after Gabby relocated to Florida, not far from where Brian's family lived. The couple quickly fell deeply in love with each other, and in 2020, they became engaged. By the following year, they were presenting themselves as a picture-perfect couple, filling their social media accounts with vlogs, photos, and carefully crafted posts that gained them a growing following. To the outside world, their relationship was picture-perfect, but in reality, things between the couple were far from the images portrayed on their social media. On the 12th of August 2021, the Moab Police Department in Utah received a 911 call reporting a domestic dispute involving the young couple. The caller claimed to have seen Brian physically assaulting Gabby during a heated argument. Police officers intercepted their white van and pulled the couple over on the side of the road. Police body cam footage, later uploaded online, revealed Gabby visibly distressed, crying and explaining how overwhelmed she felt, while Brian appeared calm, cooperative, and even somewhat friendly with the officers. Despite the witness statement that identified Brian as the aggressor, the officers ultimately concluded that Gabby had struck Brian first based on the statements Gabby made when she was privately questioned. Both officers believed that Brian had only reacted in self-defense, so they framed the whole incident as a case where Gabby was the initial aggressor. Due to this, the officers decided not to arrest Brian, but they still separated the couple for the night. Gabby was told to stay in the van, while Brian was taken to a hotel room paid for by a domestic violence support organization. This decision sparked significant controversy when the body cam footage was made public, as several debates were sparked on how the situation had been mishandled, especially considering later events that would occur between the couple. Many even questioned whether the warning signs had been ignored. Several reports would later show that concerns about Gabby and Brian's relationship were already beginning to surface, even among their closest friends. Signs of instability and controlling behaviors, particularly on Brian's part, were already becoming noticeable to those around them. During the early stages of the couple's trip, Gabby remained in frequent contact with her family, particularly her mother, whom she spoke to often. The last time Gabby's family had seen her was on the 23rd of August 2021, when she made a video call checking in with them. 4 days later, her mother received an unusual text message from Gabby's phone, referencing her grandfather in a way that seemed out of character. The message raised immediate concern, but because Gabby continued to upload seemingly normal photos and posts online, her family clung to the hope that everything was fine. However, communication with Gabby abruptly stopped not long after, leaving her family increasingly worried. Following their separation arranged by the Moab police, Gabby and Brian reunited and resumed their travels. Even after the officers' intervention, new reports of a dispute between Gabby and Brian resurfaced again when another witness came forward, claiming to have seen the young couple arguing outside a restaurant in Wyoming. According to the witness, Brian appeared visibly angry, while Gabby was in tears. This second report further confirmed that the tension between Brian and Gabby was escalating. The couple's story then took a much darker turn on the 1st of September 2021, when the white Ford Transit van they'd been using for their road trip suddenly returned to Northport, Florida, where Brian's family lived. While Brian had come back safe and sound, Gabby was not with him. For the next 10 days after his return home, Brian gave no explanation for Gabby's whereabouts. He went about his life quietly, while Gabby's family grew frantic, desperate for answers. On the 11th of September 2021, Gabby Petito was officially reported missing by her family. It didn't come as a surprise to anyone when Brian immediately became the authorities' prime suspect in the case. And what began as a missing persons report quickly escalated into a nationwide search. As authorities scrambled for leads, all of their attention turned towards Brian, who instead of cooperating with investigators, soon vanished without a trace. According to his parents, he had gone for a hike and never returned. This development left investigators at a dead end as they had no more leads, while the public's attention on the case intensified. With both Gabby missing and Brian now unaccounted for, the young couple's case spiraled into one of the most closely followed stories of the year. The mystery surrounding Gabby Petito's disappearance gained the interest of true crime enthusiasts, travel vloggers, and casual followers alike. People began reviewing the couple's travel videos and photos, hoping they might contain background details that could aid in the search. The internet was alive with speculation and theories as thousands of people worked to piece together the puzzle of what really might have happened to Gabby Petito. As time passed, the investigation appeared to be at a standstill until a major breakthrough came when a family of travel bloggers reviewing their own travel footage noticed something unusual. In one of their travel videos, they spotted a familiar white Ford Transit van parked on the side of a dirt road in Wyoming, close to the Bridgerton National Forest. Due to the vehicle's similarities with Gabby and Brian's van, the family immediately shared the footage with investigators. This important discovery enabled authorities to narrow down their search area and bring them much closer to finding Gabby's whereabouts. After scouring the surrounding wilderness, investigators made a devastating discovery. Human remains consistent with the description of Gabby Petito were located near the Spread Creek dispersed camping area within the forest. And with that, any remaining hope that Gabby might still be alive was gone. The horrific news spread quickly, shocking millions who had been following the case online. The discovery of Gabby's remains quickly sparked outrage on social media, with timelines filled with anger and grief over the injustice of her death. Following the outrage, a coroner's report on the corpse's remains later confirmed what many had feared. After a thorough examination, it was determined that Gabby had died by manual strangulation approximately 3 to 4 weeks before her body was found. The examiner also noted blunt force injuries to Gabby's head and neck during his examination. There was no doubt that Gabby had been brutally murdered, and her death was ruled a homicide. The revelations were heartbreaking, but they also intensified the search for Brian Laundrie, who by then had become the prime suspect. As investigators shifted focus to finding Brian, all attention turned once again to his family in Florida. His parents provided no helpful information about his whereabouts and instead chose to communicate only through their attorney, which provoked criticism and suspicion from the public. All of this prompted protesters to gather outside their home, demanding accountability. Weeks continued to pass, but there was still no sign of Brian despite the authorities' extensive searches in the Carlton Reserve, which was a challenging area of wetlands and dense vegetation, where his parents claimed he had gone hiking. For more than a month, their search produced no results, and speculation about Brian's whereabouts spread across the country. Things started to look bleak at this point in the investigation, and it really seemed like Brian had got away with Gabby's murder. But on the 20th of October 2021, investigators finally made another crucial discovery. While searching an area of the Carlton Reserve that had recently become accessible due to receding floodwaters, Authorities found personal belongings that were identified as Brian's, including a dirty backpack and a notebook. Investigators then focused their search around that area, and it wasn't long before they discovered human remains located close to the items they'd found earlier. Dental records later confirmed that the remains were indeed those of Brian Laundrie. In November, investigators announced that Brian had died by suicide from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Inside his recovered notebook, they found a written confession in which Brian admitted responsibility for Gabby Petito's death. This revelation confirmed what many had suspected all along, but it also marked the tragic conclusion of a case that had gripped the nation for months. Gabby's life had been cut short, and Brian, the only person who could have provided more answers, was gone as well. The family of Gabby Petito was devastated at the news of her death, but in the months that followed, they decided to create something that could serve as her legacy. They established the Gabby Petito Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting families of missing persons and victims of domestic violence. Through this foundation, they aimed to provide resources, raise awareness, and assist those facing similar situations to what Gabby had faced. This case also prompted serious questions about the role of law enforcement. The traffic stop conducted by the Moab police in August 2021 was examined critically, as many observers believed warning signs of abuse had been overlooked. Critics argued that if the situation had been handled differently, with focused attention on the issues of domestic violence rather than treating the incident as a simple dispute, the outcome might have been different. The tragic story of Gabby Petito ultimately served as a stark reminder of the dangers present in abusive relationships and the importance of recognizing these signs before they escalate. While the investigation ended with tragedy, the conversations that followed strengthened the need for better awareness, improved responses by the authorities, and stronger support systems for those at risk.
Today I'm about to confess something. A secret I had hidden for almost 40 years. I have 2 kids of my own, and I've lived a happy, fulfilled life. But this secret has been eating at me for years. And now, the person I was trying to protect is no longer alive. I need to unburden myself. Please, keep listening. The year was 1986, and I clearly remember seeing the news on our old second-hand TV. The names and photos of the young couple were flashing on the screen, while in the background the reporter was describing the gruesome details of their murder. I told my husband how unfortunate it was, as we both were newly married and almost the same age as the couple.
"They should have tied the knot before fooling around in a car, Margaret,"
he said, and grabbed his cap to leave for work. I remember thinking how heartless he was to think a couple was murdered just because they were together and unmarried. I mean, it was the 80s. We weren't in the 1800s anymore. But I knew better to keep my mouth shut. A few days later, my husband had returned home exhausted. He'd bought a present for me, a beautiful gold chain with a dangling pendant on it. I remember kissing him and thanking him for it. It wasn't new for him to be back in the wee hours of the morning, stinking of fish and sea, but the odd splashes of blood on his shirt were unusual. What happened there? I asked while scrubbing his shirt clean.
"We sliced into a fish. It accidentally bled out on my shirt."
I nodded and kept cleaning. 2 days later, I read another headline in the newspaper. This time a woman was decapitated and thrown in a bush. I squeezed the rosary around my neck and prayed for her tortured soul. That picture of the smiling girl stared back at me, and I observed something familiar, but I knew not to ask unnecessary questions. Almost a month later, one night, he came back home limping and had a long gash bleeding down his leg, just over his ankle. I rushed to help him with antiseptic, lotions, and Band-Aids. "How did this happen?" I asked while cleaning the wound.
Johnny dropped his blade again. This time my leg was his target.
He chuckled through the pain, but the angle of the cut told me another story. I knew the difference between the slash of a dropped blade and a stabbing wound. But again, I asked no questions. The next day's news showed a picture of a smiling gentleman who was choked to death by a very familiar-looking thing. The news anchor thought that this was the work of a serial killer. This victim had fought and probably hurt his attacker. A sharp Swiss blade was found in the hands of the victim. That evening, when my husband and I sat down for dinner, I told him that I was pregnant. He was overjoyed, and in the flow of our conversation he told me how Alan, one of his friends, had misplaced his favorite fishing rope recently. I nodded and smiled, caressing my stomach. I kept quiet. Now I was accountable for not just mine, but the life of my unborn child, too. But that night when I went to bed, I decided to write it all down in my diary. The timeline of the events, and most importantly, my observations. By the end of my first trimester, 2 more young women were killed.
This is for you.
He was sitting across the table from me as he pushed the box toward me. What is this?
Open it.
I did, and a gold band with a diamond in it was shining back at me. How did you? I was about to ask when he placed his hand lightly on my lips.
Do you like it?
I do, as I love the ring, but I had no clue how he afforded such a stunning ring on a fisherman's salary. But again, I did not ask questions. I put it on my ring finger and smiled at him. As my pregnancy progressed, a few more murders were reported in the same area of Colonial Parkway. There were investigations, cops patrolling and whatnot, but the culprit was never caught. The technology had not evolved enough to catch the murderer. All the murders turned into cold, unsolved cases in a matter of months, while new victims emerged every month or so. Just after the birth of our son, the news reported the death of a businessman, presumably carrying a considerable amount of cash. He was hit on the head from behind by something metallic. The night before the news, while I was nursing our son, my husband had come home smiling and promised me the best things for our son. But I had seen the small boat anchor he hid between our broken fence, with fresh blood on it. Sticking to his promise, he did bring a lot of things for our son, the most expensive thing being the wooden crib. Even then I swallowed, shut my mouth, smiled, and thanked him. That night, however, I wrote 4 whole pages in my diary. The murders became infrequent as the years passed and the technology became advanced. I had 1 more child, a daughter, and we had a beautiful family together. In 2011, we moved away to the countryside as our kids had grown up, and after that, I never heard about another murder on the Colonial Parkway again. But I held on to the diary as it just cemented my theory. In 2013, Harold, my husband, died of a sudden heart attack. It was unexpected, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel lighter after his passing. But what came the year after made me doubt myself for quite a while. Alan Wilmer Sr. was one of Harold's friends, a fellow fisherman who had come to our place for countless dinners. He was a good man. He was arrested for 2 of the 17 total murders, as his DNA was found on 2 murder sites. One was on a fishing rope which I had recognized from a long time ago in the news, and the second was a lock of his hair. The man kept on denying any link to the murders, but he was convicted nonetheless, as the evidence was against him. But they couldn't even tie him to any of the other murders. The Colonial Parkway murders were only partially solved, according to the authorities. But were they really? Was Alan Wilmer Sr. really connected to the murders, or was it entirely the doing of my own beloved husband? I know the truth. Now, so do you. I never reported him, as I was scared of ending up with the same fate as his victims, or worse, shamed by society for his actions and choices. But I will never know why he did what he did. Do any of you have any theories? Why were all those people killed? How did he pick his victims? And most importantly, why do serial killers kill it all?
Hi, I'm Margaret Lopez, and welcome to the Spooked and Scared podcast, where we discuss true crime with a twist of imagination. In today's episode, I'm about to narrate a story that a real-life serial killer from Maryland heavily inspired. Although the names, dates, and the sequence of events in my story may be a little different from the original incident, but rest assured, at the end I will reveal who the story is originally based upon. So, are you ready to be spooked and scared today? It's June 21st, 1990, when a woman named Jean Anderson reaches the county sheriff's office in the middle of the afternoon and collapses on the ground as soon as she is inside. As expected, the cops rush her to the hospital, looking at her condition. Jean, who had not been identified by the cops just yet, was badly injured. She had finger imprints around her neck and wrists. Her whole body was bruised as if she had been beaten within an inch of her life and somehow still managed to survive. When she regains consciousness in the hospital, two detectives are waiting by her bed to listen to her story, and what Jean Anderson proceeds to tell them puts an end to a year-long investigation led by the two detectives. In May of the year 1989, a woman named Dahlia fights with her husband and leaves their small home screaming, in the middle of the day with two kids in tow. The whole neighborhood knows that the Henderson couple has finally hit rock bottom. Dahlia Henderson was Mark Henderson's wife, and the couple had been married for over a decade and had two daughters. However, the once happy Henderson couple had been quarreling quite a lot for more than a year now. The reason was money. Raising two daughters in the heart of Maryland wasn't easy, and Dahlia was doing all that she could to feed, clothe, and keep the roof over her family's head. But her husband Mark was always in between jobs. But that afternoon, Dahlia called it quits and walked out of the house and the relationship. Given that she was the sole financial provider and primary caregiver of her two kids, she was granted the permanent custody of their daughters and the house. Mark, who barely had his life together, was homeless, jobless, and with no means to see his two daughters. He had lost everything in a span of months. Heartbroken and divorced, Mark tried to restart his life by renting a matchbox apartment in the rundown areas of Maryland, and gets a job as a security at a general store. But sitting in front of a store all day wasn't the kind of work that interested him. And you know what they say, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. Mark was no different. He observed people day after day, but no one knew what was going on in his head until it was too late. Several months passed, and on a whim, Mark quit his job. His colleagues who had grown close to him were confused and worried about him, but he told all of them that he had a big business idea and could no longer wait to execute it. Within a week of quitting, Mark had opened a fast food cart in his neighborhood, and it had become a quick success. His new customers had loved his burger and fries, and no one was surprised that Mark had entered the food industry given his love for food. However, while everything was finally turning up in Mark's life, maybe for the first time in several years, there was a murmur on the street about something awful. The whole of Maryland was terrorized by the dismembered dead bodies of two homeless men found in downtown. Rumors were flying about any and every possible reason behind the mutilation and murders, but the cops were suspecting something else entirely. As Mark's business started making him a substantial income, enough to file a petition for the shared custody of his daughters, there were two more bodies found in town. This time it was two sex workers who often worked late into the night. The bodies were disposed of in the same fashion as the first two bodies, and now the authorities were sure there was a serial killer on the loose. Newspapers had picked up the news and warnings were issued. The investigation was in full force, but the cops had hardly any leads to follow. They could not profile the killer, nor could they locate where and how the killer murdered his victims. On the other hand, looking at Mark's new life, the court had granted him partial custody of his 2 daughters. Almost a year later, Mark was spending time with his kids. It was the best time of his life. However, when his oldest daughter returned to her mother's home after visiting her dad, she said that he had left for hours during the night while they slept. Dahlia brushed it off, but when the girls repeatedly told her about his disappearances during the night while they visited, she got suspicious. But before taking the matter to court, she decided to speak with Mark instead. So, one night after her job, she decided to visit him. But unfortunately, Mark wasn't there. She waited on his porch, but as time passed, she started to smell something rotting from within the house. She described it later like she smelled death itself. Not being able to breathe the scent any longer, she found the key Mark had hidden in a potted plant and opened the house. What happened later was a string of strange events. Dahlia opened his fridge to find the source of the stench and found a piece of meat lying inside. It had gone bad, so out of instinct, she decided to throw it away in a trash can that Mark kept in his backyard. As she opened the trash can, she screamed at the contents inside. There was a human brain discarded in it. But that wasn't even the worst part. When she froze in his backyard trying to process everything, she heard another scream. It was low and muffled, but it was coming from the basement of Mark's home. She hurried towards the basement and tried to open the door, but it was shut with multiple locks. But a faint voice spoke to her from inside. It was a woman, and she was begging her to set her free before the big man arrived. Dahlia, who was terrified by now, tried her best to pry open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Finally, after multiple attempts and the joint effort of both women, the door was opened. But before Dahlia could get the woman upstairs, a car had pulled into the driveway. It was Mark. The second he noticed his home's door open, he knew something was wrong. Mark marched into his home to find the 2 scared women, and all he saw was red. Hours later, a woman named Jean Anderson reaches the county sheriff's office in the middle of the afternoon and collapses on the ground as soon as she is inside. Jean was the woman from Mark's basement who had managed to escape while Mark's ex couldn't make it out. When the cops heard Jean's statement, they reached the location and found a mangled body of a woman who loosely matched the description of Dahlia in the living room, while Mark was still in the kitchen chopping meat. He was immediately arrested, and without much resistance, he revealed his full story. Since the divorce, Mark had grown resentful of women and people in general. When he was down, no one stepped up to help him. So as he saw people go about their day while he was working as a security guard, a twisted need rooted within him. A need to hurt people. Cops had only managed to find 5 of his victims, including Jean, who was a homeless woman. But according to his confession, he had started to kill long back since he was a security guard. But taking it a step ahead, Mark had opened the fast food cart only to feed his victims to unsuspecting customers. During his interrogation, he confessed that human meat is undetectable if mixed well with beef. And the times when he disappeared during the night while he had his daughters were when he would either look for new victims, kill them, or dismember and dispose of them. This entire case had opened the floodgate to 1990. In Maryland, everyone seemed to have an opinion about the killer. Based on his confession, Jean's testimony, and the evidence found in his home, he was convicted to lifetime imprisonment. However, what remains a mystery to date is the locations where he disposed of the bodies of his other 6 unknown and unidentified victims. Even after many attempts by the cops, Mark never breathed a word about them. This is the story of the cannibal killer of Maryland, originally known as Joe Metheny. In 2017, Metheny died in prison, giving peace to the families of his victims once and forever. And now it's time for me to take your leave. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe to my channel and leave your thoughts on today's story, so I can keep bringing you more scared and spooky stories. Till then, take care.